If the Iron Fleet tries to ferry in more food, the dragons will destroy them.
While Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
We need to find Euron Greyjoy's fleet and sink it.
Your Grace, he's already destroyed a good portion of our fleet.
While Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
Euron's ships could be anywhere, or in more than one place. He'd be flying around the open seas alone.
While Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
We do not sell.
No, we do not sell.
Yeah, so. Cheers.
We had messed up the most kind of obvious storytelling possibility.
But it would ruin the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been a year now since I did a video marking the 4-year anniversary of Game of Thrones' horrendous ending. Originally, I wasn't planning to do one at the 5-year mark, but people continued to view and comment on that last one. This is because Game of Thrones' disastrous ending still resonates with fans, and today I'm going to discuss why Dan and Dave's destruction of a once revered TV series still matters, and how the attempt to rehabilitate them for what they did to the series is being attempted. So let's dive in. Recently, Jacob Anderson, who played Grey Worm on the show, gave an interview to Men's Health where he primarily spoke about his lead role in Season 2 of the series Interview with a Vampire, but he did have some things to say about the final season of Game of Thrones. Anderson said, "That's my favorite kind of thing when you're like, this shouldn't work or this feels risky. It feels kind of punk to just throw the rule book out. I understand why people were disappointed with certain things, but I thought it was a pretty fun way to end it, to be honest. So there's this little demon in me that when I read the Season 8 scripts for Game of Thrones, I was like, cool, let's go. Let's do it." Now, this isn't a jab at Anderson. He wasn't invested in the series or the lore like many fans, but what I found so funny about it was that these comments were made in an article where Anderson says he likes chaos. That's why he found it to be fun, but it highlights how the ending had no semblance of continuity with the story that had been told previously. There were no logical build-ups to the payoffs. It was pure chaos.
Chaos is a ladder.
There's another ladder, too, that I've seen some trying to build, and it's a bit of a revisionist history of the final season of Game of Thrones. I even saw a hint of it in the Jacob Anderson piece. The writer of it called the reaction to Game of Thrones' final season as mixed. Well, it was far from that. It was an unprecedented disaster for the audience, with at least 70% of viewers disliking the conclusion. And that's remarkable considering a lot of casual fans were just there for the spectacle, or as Jacob called it, the chaos. And the hardcore book readers and A Song of Ice and Fire fans loathed it even more than the general audience. And when I look at the video I did last year, which has a like to dislike ratio of around 96 to 4%, with a large sample size of over 600K views, and looking through the many comments there, it's clear this wasn't a mixed reaction to the ending of Game of Thrones. It's been thoroughly rejected. Now, why is all this important? Well, if we're going to get the best out of creators, studios, and networks, we need to hold them accountable for when things go wrong. If you just consume whatever is dished out without any criticism, it's not going to get any better. This is particularly the case with top franchises like The Lord of the Rings. That film trilogy has stood the test of time as some of the absolute best of what cinema has to offer, whereas the mess that Prime has shoveled out in its Rings of Power series is the complete opposite. It's as if they thought fans of Lord of the Rings would accept anything just to revisit Tolkien's world, if you would even call that abomination Tolkien. And there was a similar backlash from Star Wars fans over the last trilogy series, which destroyed Luke Skywalker's iconic character, and then a long string of poorly written series on Disney Plus, which further diminished the franchise, and only provided a few exceptions in there as they oversaturated fans with a mediocre product. So it's important to differentiate what's good and what's not when it comes to entertainment, or things will never get better, and studios will continue to play to the lowest common denominator. if there's no backlash and if people just keep supporting whatever is dished out. From the small number of dissenters out there who defend the Game of Thrones ending, there are a few approaches that they take. Let's just call them Dan and Dave's champions.
I will be your champion.
John Bradley, who played Sam on Game of Thrones, has been the leader of this effort to rehabilitate Benioff and Weiss, and he's been at it for a while. So let's run through some of the things that John and others have said in defense of the show. The first one isn't something John Bradley said, but it's one that I've always found the funniest. It's, get over it. The show is over. The thing about film and TV is that it's timeless. You can enjoy The Godfather 1 and 2 today, even though they're 50 years old, and we can equally hate on the horrendous third installment, which is over 30 years old now. That's the way it is with any form of art. Maybe some people don't have a passion for things. It's like when a fan gets upset about their team losing and other more casual ones just enjoy the game or the season. And really, there's nothing wrong with that. I mentioned Star Wars before and what they did to that franchise. But that's something I'm not as invested in as some others. But I recognize it means more to some, just like Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire does for me. So let's get to the next one. And this is one John Bradley brought up himself. He said, quote, "It was highly unlikely that we were ever going to please everybody," end quote. No one has ever created something that they believe everyone is going to like, but there's an enormous difference in doing that and creating something that the overwhelming majority of the audience despises. This shouldn't be a difficult concept to wrap one's head around. I mean, it's why this commercial ad works. John do a commercial for a toothpaste 1 out of 10 dentists recommend and say, hey, you are never going to please all of them. Then there's another little more nuanced approach that some take. They'll say, well, you just didn't get the ending you wanted. They think that they sound smarter than the first two groups because they're making it more subjective. You had a certain ending in your mind, and well, it didn't happen that way. You're upset that you didn't get what you wanted to see on screen. You know what's the funniest part of this tact is that they forget we're talking about Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire, where George R. R. Martin often takes a bittersweet approach at best and often just rips out our hearts. So we didn't get what we wanted. So you mean to tell me we were all sitting watching season 1 of Game of Thrones and cheering on Joffrey when he called for Ned's head? There were plenty of smiles at that moment, I'm sure. And in season 3, an audience full of Bolton and Frey fans cheered as Robb's wife was butchered and Catelyn watched on as her son was killed before having her own throat slit. We all drank to this, just like Walder Frey. There was just so much fan service here. As Game of Thrones fans, there's a difference between watching something you don't want to have happen, but still enjoying it because it was well written and made sense due to the characters' motivations and the decisions leading up to it. This is in direct contrast to results that make no sense from what preceded them, and that's the mindless chaos we were subjected to by Dan and Dave in the latter seasons.
We're in a crypt. Nobody thought of that. He's bringing all the dead people back to life, and they put the women and children in a crypt with all the dead people.
I think you've got to start wondering, what the hell is this plot?
Right now, Benioff and Weiss are receiving good reviews for season 1 of The Three Body Problem on Netflix. It doesn't quite measure up to the reception for the first season of Game of Thrones, but who knows? They might stick the landing on this one. After what they did to Game of Thrones, I'm not watching. I wouldn't want them running a series for me. It's like giving your car keys to someone who just totaled their vehicle after reckless driving. If they don't drive The Three Body Problem off a cliff, it still doesn't change what they did to Game of Thrones, and it shouldn't be forgotten. For the sake of getting higher quality entertainment in the future, and saving other franchises from what A Song of Ice and Fire and others have been a victim to. And that's why when people like John Bradley ask us to give the ending of Game of Thrones another chance, there's only one answer to give them.
No! God, please, no! 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 You're goddamn right.
There's no time for revisionist history of this series that Benioff and Weiss destroyed. We can only hope that the backlash from it and the disappointment that fans still feel today will lead us to better, higher quality entertainment in the future, because that's why pointing out the flaws of Game of Thrones still matters. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button. And if you're interested in more on Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, listen to Caraxes and subscribe. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I'll see you soon.